Hello, everyone. This is welcome to the day two of Digital Transformation Conclave. This is the day two, which would be focusing on digital India, and we had an amazing day one session focusing on healthcare sector, and we had speakers over from across the country, globe, and also those from the industry. Today we had an amazing inaugural session with the chief guest address from the Minister of IT and Electronics of Government of Odisha, uh, Mr. Behra ji, and we also had some representation, several representation from Government of India. Now, this particular session, I am personally delighted as stellar speakers have joined us with whom I had the opportunity to associate and work with over the years. First, I would like to introduce one of the Telangana. He was the top third ranker of batch IS batch of 1996, and IITIN from Delhi. He has held several key positions with the state of Telangana. He was the district collector Hyderabad, and prior to the prior to bifurcation of the Telugu speaking states into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, he held the position of special commissioner with Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. Also, the position as secretary with Municipal Administration and Urban Development, and also INPR, that is Information and Public Relationship. Currently, he is serving as commissioner for collegiate and technical education. He, to his credit, he is also been conferred with national award for national leadership award in for innovation in education. So please join me in welcoming Sri Naveen Mittalji. Welcome, sir. Thanks for joining
And
us.
thank you, Sudhir, and good afternoon to all the participants.
We will be glad to have you as a moderator. We are also joined by Mr. Sanjay Gadan, who is from the Department of Information Technology from Government of Gujarat. Welcome, Sanjay Gadan ji. Namaskar. Thanks for joining us. And we are also joined by Mr. Kamal Kashyap, who is the Director, Public Sector Sales with HPE India, who would be putting forward the industry perspective. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Kamal.
Thank you, Sudhir, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much.
We are joined by yet another stellar speaker from the state of Telangana. If there is one officer who needs to be identified to for putting Telangana on a fast track, the fastest growing state in the IT industry, and also for empowering the citizens with information technology, that is a senior bureaucrat of 1992 IS batch, Sri Jayesh Ranjanji, who is the Principal Secretary for Information Technology, Electronics, Industry and Commerce, and also he is also the Vice Chancellor for Jawaharlal Nehru Technology University. Welcome, Jayesh sir. Thanks for joining us. We're also joined by our special speaker from the state, from the government of West Bengal, Mr. Dr. Abhishek Roy. He is head SM Department of Personal and Administrative Reforms and E-Governance, Government of West Bengal. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Abhishek.
Thank you.
And I would also like to welcome our speaker, Sri Amit Kumar Sinhaji, Director, Information Technology Development Agency with the government of Uttarakhand. Namaskar, Amit ji. Thanks for joining us. We would also, Namaskar, sir. And we also have a very senior bureaucrat from the state of Karnataka, Dr. Shalini Rajneesh, who's the Additional Chief Secretary for the Department of Program Monitoring, Planning and Statistics. She will be sharing her advanced the initiatives in the field of information technology. I would request the moderator of this session, Sri Naveen Mittalji, to please take over. Over to you, Naveen Mittal, sir.
Thank you, Sudhir, and a very good afternoon to all my fellow panelists and all the participants in this webinar. I must thank PAC News Network for organizing this series in which some very interesting sessions are taking place. So the session which we are having now is about innovation in governance, and the theme is that why innovation, when innovation redefines governance and new governance for the new world order. We are all aware that this is the time. I mean, when innovation is something which is totally redefining the way things working globally. Almost no sector is untouched by innovation, and in many sectors, innovations have completely disrupted the way things are done. And we have got a huge number of examples around us. We see that in mobility, we see that in tourism, we see that in many areas of health and e-commerce. We see total kind of transformation and total disruption in the way things are happening. So the question which is there is that how much important innovation is in the governance, and what are the good examples of innovations which have redefined the governance, and what can be really done to speed up innovation in governance, and also in terms of taking an idea forward right up to the implementation stage. Because many times we have seen in the past that we have got some brilliant ideas and brilliant policies, but when it really comes to the execution, it becomes a real challenge and it becomes a real problem. So I'm sure that we will have an interesting discussion, because all my fellow panelists are very experienced in their fields. I would first start with Ms. Jayesh Ranjan. As Sudhir has mentioned, he's the Principal Secretary of IT and Industries in the state of Telangana, and a brilliant officer, I must say, who has really, I would say, brought in innovation to the core in areas in which he's working presently, and also in the areas which he has worked in the past. In fact, he's been handling the sector of IT right from the formation, or I mean, almost nearly immediately after the formation of the state, and done some brilliant work in getting the best of the world into Hyderabad and in many areas of governance in the state of Telangana. So, really welcome, sir, and very good afternoon to all of you. So, I would like to hear about your ideas in, because you've been really at the forefront of driving innovation in the governance. What's your ideas, and if you can also give some of your experiences about how you've used innovation in governance and how we can speed up this process.
Thank you very much, Naveen. Good afternoon, fellow panelists. So the answer that I'll give to you, Naveen, and share with everyone is extremely experiential. Instead of giving a theoretical answer, I want to actually share with all of you what has been going on in Telangana for the last 6 years. And this experience will teach a lot of things about how do you bring more and more innovation within the government. So in my opinion, if you want to promote innovation in government, there is a three-pillared approach, which is very essential. The first is that the fact that you are keen to bring innovation in the government, that intention must be known to everyone. I mean, you cannot just think in your mind that I must bring in innovation and hope that things will fall in place magically. There must be a policy, there must be an intent. So one of the first things which we did in Telangana in way back in 2004, not in 14, but in 2015, we brought out a policy on innovations and startups. And as we know, lots of innovative work actually is coming from the world of startups. So it's a combined policy which looks at startups, which looks at entrepreneurship and also innovation. And this is much before the national government started, let us say, the Startup India program and so on and so forth. So our initiatives in that sense predates what subsequently became nationally mainstreamed initiative. So if you look at our policy, the innovation and startup policy, first of all, you will find it to be a very action-oriented document. See, normally in India, when we look at policies, they look very good on paper, they are written very eloquently, but obviously very little of it translates on the ground. So ours is not like that. We actually consulted lots of innovators, lots of entrepreneurs, few startups who were working in Hyderabad in those days, and based on what difficulties, what challenges, what pain points they mentioned about, they spoke about, we actually got those things covered in our policy. So one is this, that if the government is keen on bringing in innovation, the intention should be very well documented so that there is a buy-in. Government also, while we use the term loosely, but as you and I and everyone else in this panel knows, it's not a homogeneous organization. Government is at multiple layers, in multiple silos, and very often, and people joke about it, that the left hand in the government does not know what the right hand is doing. So having a encompassing policy with has the buy-in of everyone is the first very important step. The second step, and here this is the step which I would really take a lot of credit for, because I personally feel that Telangana is recognized as a state which encourages innovation, brings lots of innovation in the government, is because of this particular point that I'm going to speak about now. So this is on how do you translate policy into action. You may bring out a good policy, an action-oriented policy, a policy which has been prepared after proper consultation, etc. But how does it translate into action? And this is again something which we hear about India quite a lot, that there are great policies that are written, but very little of it translates on the ground. So in Telangana, what we have done is that we have created institutions to handle the conversion of policy into action, and not just one institution or two institutions, but a plethora of institutions. In fact, there are 7 institutions in Telangana whose responsibility is to convert whatever is provided in the innovation policy into action. And each of them fulfill a separate part of the responsibility, but they also integrate in a very seamless manner. So for example, to promote incubation, we have institutions like the T-Hub, the V-Hub, the T-Works, to identify innovators in rural areas, in grassroots areas. We have institution called the State Innovation Council, TSIC, to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship in colleges, in schools. We have an institution which is called TASK, the Telangana Academy for Skills and Knowledge, to ensure that innovation is supported by dozens of eminent R&D institutions that are located in Hyderabad. Since you live in Hyderabad, Naveen, you know for sure how many brilliant R&D institutions are there in the city, international R&D institutions, national government promoted R&D institutions, private sector institutions, and how do they encourage innovation. So there is a body in Telangana which is called RICH, R-I-C-H, the Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad, which actually promotes that. We have created a very new body about a year ago, which focuses on emerging technology-based innovation. So this is the second point, that you have to have institutions, otherwise the policy will remain on paper and nothing actually will happen on the ground. So this is the remarkable thing about Telangana, that we have created institutions to convert policy into action. The third pillar, which again is very fundamental and a very neglected pillar, is that where is the talent to run the institutions and the programs in the institutions. And typically within the government, we somehow have this kind of a belief that all the talent is within the government. In Telangana, we are very conscious of this reality that there can be potentially much, much superior talent outside the government. And we must have the openness and ability and flexibility to bring that inside the government. So all these institutions that I talked about, I can share this with you, that each institution is run by people who have been selected from the open market on open market terms based on their talent and ability. So, for example, I talked about T-Hub. The T-Hub CEO is a proven innovation champion in the private sector. The RICH Director General is someone who has distinguished himself in bridging the gap between academia and industry in multiple institutions, the most prominent of them being the Indian School of Business, and so on and so forth. So these 3 pillars, you must have a great policy, but a practical and actionable policy which addresses the pain points of potential innovators. You must have institutions to convert that policy into action. And finally, you must have talent which will run these institutions and take up multiple programs under that institution. So this is the mantra of Telangana.
Thank you very much, sir. I think what you really talked about in the sense these three pillars, which is intention and then translation of the policy into action, and in the institutions and the talent which one can also bring it from outside into the government. I think they really form the bedrock of getting innovation to the government. So I'll come back to you again for some follow-up questions. So I'll move to the next panelist, which is Mr. Kamal Kashyap, who's from HP India. Mr. Kamal Kashyap, you've been also watching this introduction of innovation in governance. What are your views on your experience in this regard as to how quickly we can get innovation into the governance and the kind of roadblocks which are there in translating those innovations into good results in the government?
Thank you, Mr. Mittal. And, first of all, it's a privilege to actually be on the same panel as some of the most leading practitioners of innovation and governance in the country. And to the fellow panelists who are actually at the forefront of trying to bring in innovation, and specifically for many of the panelists, it is the technology which is helping them innovate in the way, the governance touches all of us on a daily basis, right? So from the as an interested industry person as well as a citizen, what we're seeing is that progressively the amount of technology innovation that is coming in, and how various government institutions are leading the thought process in terms of implementing it on a day-to-day basis is really impacting all of us, and that's really started to give fruits. And when I look at it, I look at three parts of it. One is that we as a country, we always had a huge amount of data, but now using the technology as well as thought process, SOPs and stuff, we're seeing how various departments are actually leveraging that data innovatively, both in terms of planning as well as various interventions and all that stuff. And a leading example of that is also the current situation that we're going through. And I'm sure as we go through different perspectives through the panel discussion, we would see, and as partners to various organizations across the country, state, central and city, we've seen how the data has been leveraged, especially in the current situation, to actually provide insights, provide proactive measures, provide planning, provide predictions in terms of how and where the interventions will be required, and to, of course, then plan for it and actually support the individuals on the ground. So that is one big part where we're seeing a huge amount of work happening, huge amount of leverage happening. We were always rich in data as a country. We're a country of more than 1 billion people, but that's something which is coming in now. The second part is also what we're seeing, which is once again been a trend where India as a country is leading, and as a global organization, we of course interact with governments not just here but across the globe, in terms of bringing in the technology to actually reach the last mile. And if you see some of our institutions, they have become the world leading benchmarks in terms of how actually we can use innovative technology excuse me, in terms of bringing benefits and schemes and programs and touch the person the last mile, whether it is the massive platform like Aadhaar, which has become a platform to actually provide authentication to various users, and it's completely a technology platform, right? There are of course processes and stuff to support it, but if the technology is not mature enough or it's not leveraged enough to actually provide an authentication in the kind of time frame that they do, it'll not be successful as a platform. So to do it at that scale, possibly that's one unique example across the globe in the way how we have leveraged and implemented digital payment systems across, how we have actually done benefit transfer and ensured that various schemes like PDS, healthcare and all that are then digitally connected. Some of the schemes that we're working on from an innovation perspective actually connect the whole the healthcare scheme or a digital platform around healthcare, for example, which will not just allow the patients or the citizens to actually connect digitally and get the benefits, but also will provide a rich source of data, which can be then mined and analyzed to plan interventions, to plan various schemes, and as well as figure out trends way ahead of what we are able to do currently. So one is the data side, the other is this platform side, and third is leveraging the existing investments, which we again, once again, the current situation is a great example, and we've been privileged enough to work with multiple cities in terms of, for example, the ICCC Smart City implementations. And what we see that we were very able to quickly adopt the existing ICCC technology to actually integrate with some of the startups, as Mr. Ranjan was talking about, who had created some platforms or government's own system in terms of data, and actually make it a nerve center to handle the pandemic for that city or for that state, triggering various simplistic processes, but also things like location awareness, monitoring, containment areas, and so on and so forth. So we see that both in a short term planning, mid term, as well as long term from our country's perspective. Of course, as a country and as technology provider, we still have a long way to go and cover. But I think that is showing today. So that's what I wanted to start with, Mr. Mittal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kamalji. I think you really pointed out these three things. So one is the data, which is data availability. The two is the platform and the last mile connectivity, and third is leveraging some of the existing investments which are there. I think these three are very important points, and you touched upon the two issues, which is Aadhaar and also the payment solutions. I think India is probably second to none in the whole world in terms of the unique identity which we have been able to give to our citizens, and also the payment, online payment platforms have grown, and this whole jam community, as we call it, Jan Aadhaar Yojana accounts and Aadhaar and mobile, because most of Indians connect to the internet through the mobile. I think the combination of these three have really helped to spur innovations in many other fields and areas which I've touched. I can come back to you for some follow-up questions. Next, I'll move on to Mr. Sanjay Gadam, who's in government of Gujarat. So, Mr. Gadam, you have kind of worked in this IT sector for quite some time, and Gujarat is a state which is known for innovations and also some of the developments which have happened, especially huge growth of the state in recent times. What are your views on this topic which we are discussing today, which is innovations for new governance? And maybe some of your experience in how you've used innovations in transforming governance and in your own department or the departments which you've helped do that. I think you are on mute, maybe, or not able to hear you. Not able to hear you, Mr. Gadam. Yeah. No, sorry, Mr. Gadam, we are not able to hear you. No. Maybe I think you can probably connect without the earphones, or no, some issue with your earphones, maybe. Not yet. What I would suggest you, if you can maybe reconnect again, or just check your audio settings, please. Okay. So until we get the audio right with Mr. Sanjay Gadam, I move on to our next panelist, which is Dr. Abhishek Roy from the government of West Bengal. So, Dr. Roy, again, I'll ask you this similar question, which is your experience with innovations in the state of West Bengal, and you also can also talk about the diffusion of innovations within the government itself and your experience on that.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all the distinguished panelists and all the speakers. So I would like to touch 2-3 points. I'll be speaking on two segments. First is basically innovations in e-governance, and secondly, why innovations fail. What are the key parameters which we should look up? Because there are many good innovations which have failed. Ultimately, whatever we innovate, if it is not accepted by the users, if they're not using it, there's no point of such innovations. So primarily, there are a lot of literature regarding these two things. Before that, I would like to brief you about few innovations which we have done. When I joined West Bengal government, and as you know, Howrah railway station is one of the biggest railway station, but to commute from Howrah railway station was a big headache. So primarily from Howrah railway station, around 10,000 taxis fly every day. But these taxis basically bargain with the passengers, and unknown passengers used to pay 3 times, 4 times based on their requirements. So at that point of time, there was a prepaid booth also, as it is prevalent in all other big cities, railway stations and airports. But in spite of being prepaid taxi booths, these taxis used to ply there, but they will not take passengers from prepaid taxi booth. So what we started a RFID based taxi movement right in 2011. So wherein we place the RFID tags in almost all the taxis. It costs only 15 rupees. And with this RFID tags, what happened? And then RFID readers were placed. Now with RFID tags, the entire inventory of taxis coming down to the Howrah station was captured. So now anyone who is coming to the railway station, they are bound to take a system generated passenger. So as a result, if they are taking a passenger out of the queue, so they will be fined. And then there were queue. So taxis can be booked directly in the
I think there's some connectivity issue with Dr. Roy. Are you able to hear us, Dr. Roy? No, I think we've lost him. So we'll probably come back to you once the connection is restored. I move on to my next panelist, which is Mr. Salil Das from the government of Tripura. So welcome, Mr. Das. In fact, I want to start off first with the importance of innovation in governance and some of the examples of how you've in your department or department which you've helped to drive innovation in government, especially for improvement of some of the service delivery of various programs of the government for the benefit of the citizens. Maybe you can talk about your experience and in the government of Tripura. You're on mute, Mr. Tamskia.
Am I audible? Yes. The various applications, citizen-centric applications are available for the benefit of the citizen. But in reality, it is not help the citizen to get the services at the earliest. Because one thing, when you apply for any services, you have to submit the supporting documents like your income certificate, PRTC, your mark sheet. All the records are available with the government. Again, we are asking the citizen to submit, though we are having all the records. It should not be. One. Second point is that every department is having a own citizen database, like your transport, your PDS, your agriculture. Everybody is having a database. Plus, the structure of citizen database are different from transport than PDS. So there is a issue, is a interoperability of the among the all the citizen-centric citizen database owned by the concerned department, and no need to store citizen database by all departments. There should be one citizen database. It should be accessed by the all respective department to deliver the services. So to improve our service delivery, we need to reduce the supporting document. One. Second point is that there should be a single source of truth of citizen database. Everybody, suppose sometimes we are asking the PRTC. You don't know the PRTC, the scanned copy they have submitted, whether it is a original or fake. Don't need to require your PRTC certificate. You have the, because PRTC certificate issued by the state government, not the private party. So all the data you have. Second point is that government should focus on build a single source truth of database. One. Second is that reduce the inspection. Why inspection is required? If the person apply for the database, apply for the applications or services, he should be authenticated by either Aadhaar, or you have all the documents you can authenticate it automatically, and citizens should get the services within 5 minutes. You know, in Estonia, if anyone apply for the company registration, he will get within 20 minutes. If it is more than 20 minutes, then it should be inspected. Why it is more than 20 minutes? Because all the data, all the records of the citizen is available with the state government. But I mean government. So no need to submit the any database. And also, we the concerned department should have only related parameters except citizen related. They have a only citizen unique ID. All the citizen related demographic, everything to be stored in the single database. So everyone will, suppose your PDS, your transport, everyone should connect to the SSOD just to authenticate the beneficiary, nothing else. SSOD, just like Aadhaar, SSOD does not have any record relating to transport or a PDS. These data is mainly for to authenticate the beneficiary. Why we inspect the applicant? Just to authenticate the applicant whether he is the person. That is nothing else. So this should be reduced. So citizen will get instant services. Thank you, sir. This is my time.
Thank you, Mr. Das. I think you've raised very pertinent points. One of them is that the data which is already available in the government, what is the point in asking the citizens? I think that's a very, very fair point. In fact, I can tell you the example of Telangana, since I am handling the higher education and the technical education in the state. We are involved with student admissions, both in our engineering colleges through an exam called MCET, which is the state equivalent of JEE, and also in our degree colleges for non-engineering courses. We also have a common platform which is called the DOST, which is Degree Online Services of Telangana. And we basically worked on the same point which you have raised, which was that we were asking earlier our students to upload a copy or Xerox copy or a scanned copy of their caste certificate and their income certificate. And you know that information gets lost because once you scan it, it's just an image. I mean, again, you need to do image processing on that to get the name, to get the date of birth, to get the actual caste or the actual income. And then you need, I don't think the machine operations were strong enough to again interpret that information. So again, one needed a human verification at the back end to look at that scanned certificate and then authenticate whatever information was being submitted for the caste or the income or no nativity or the residence or whatever it pertains to. And we replaced it with a simple thing that instead of scanning the certificate, students now only upload the certificate number. And our system now pings the revenue department, which issues those certificates, and gets that entire data from the backend. And that has really, I would say, not only simplified the system in terms of students now not required to upload their certificate in a scanned form, but also improved our accuracy a lot, because now we are able to really compare the data which is available from the data sets. So that's, I mean, I just wanted to talk to you about the example which we have done, but one can go further in the sense you really mentioned about the data being linked to Aadhaar. So in fact, going forward, one doesn't even need to ask the number of the certificate from the candidate. I mean, if the student gives his Aadhaar number, one can actually pick up the entire data relating to that student from the government databases. You mentioned also about the fact that one can have one citizen database. In fact, you also give the example of Estonia, which is, I would say, in fact, it's a global leader in terms of enterprise based governance. In fact, this is something which I think our MeitY is also trying to do and emulate in India, which is having some sort of an enterprise based system for government also. In fact, then there is no need for the data to reside in one location or one server or one department. Once you are on that enterprise system, then that enterprise system connects to every department which is owner of that information. For example, let's say that the department which is having the land records can have their information. The department which is responsible for the caste, they can have that information. But then there's a common enterprise bus which links these databases, and you want whatever data, you can just pick it up. So I think that is something which, as a country, we need to move forward to. And I'm really happy that you pointed out these facts, and also talked about no need for inspection. I fully agree with you. I think inspection should be done only when there's a need for any physical infrastructure inspection. And I don't think to verify the citizenry information, you really need inspections, because if the data is residing in government servers, there's no real need to go to the field to get that information. So I'm happy that you pointed it out, and I'll come back at you again for some follow-up questions. And I go back to Dr. Ram Roy, and I can see that now his network is all right. So maybe, Dr. Rai, you can continue from where our network broke.
Yeah, as I was talking about this innovations and all, so the primarily I need to make you explain that the point here is that it's not necessary that every time you need to spend huge amount of money for innovations. So the way we started for RFID taxi, now we are using the same RFID tag has now evolved into this fast tags for toll booths and all. We are using the same toll booth fast tags for smart parking. So nowadays, for the parking, we are creating some systems where for the parking payment will be also collected automatically in real time based on the input and in and out time of the vehicles. Based on that, FASTag will basically tag in their in and out time, and time will be collected, and the amount will be deducted directly. So these types of innovations we are trying to share. One innovation I would like to share during this COVID pandemic, to manage this migrant laborers. So we started three applications basically. One was a web-based applications, which we knew that it will be a less success, but we need to keep it as of now. Two other applications were a SMS-based application and a WhatsApp bot-based application. And we were expecting more hit on the SMS because this was primarily meant for the migrant laborers. But on the contrary, we saw that around 5 lakh people opted for WhatsApp bot and only 50,000 people opted for SMS. And WhatsApp bot has now become the new trend in innovations, where we can use a lot of things. So now we started using WhatsApp bot in furthermore some more dimensions. In fact, the metro, which has been started now, we are to maintain physical distancing, we are issuing passes for this metro using this bot and all. Regarding the citation challenge, for traffic challenge, earlier there was an option that you used to get a letter after 6 months that I have been my vehicle was found in no parking zone, that we have violated the red signals and all these things. And since it's a 6 months or 5 months affair, we used to abuse the police personnel. No, I was never there, and all these things were there. So what we did, we did a simple innovation. We asked the traffic guard who normally used to note down the vehicle numbers, violating those things, and then that entire diary was updated in the systems, and we used to send letters after 6 months. We gave them a simple mobile phone. They were asked to send a SMS about the vehicle and the code of the violation. And in real time, by the time you cross the second signal, you'll be getting an SMS that okay, in the previous signal you violated the traffic norms, and even fined 400 rupees. The idea here is that not to earn money. The idea here is to basically bring down the traffic violations. So the moment they'll get an SMS, I know it will be difficult to read while driving, but if by in any traffic signal he get to know about that SMS, and he knows that I have done a violation in the previous signal, he will be more cautious in his driving. Similarly, when we came out with a real-time traffic prosecution, so wherein we have come down with a device, and on the real-time traffic violations are being made. But then also we saw that most of the commercial vehicle owners were not interested in paying the traffic challenge in real time. Private vehicle owners were paying it. So then we came down to the remote pay option, because the commercial vehicle drivers used to say the owner will understand. It is not my headache, owner will understand. So then we came down with a real-time SMS-based payment. So when someone is caught in the traffic, he can give the owner's mobile number. A mobile number based on that number will get the owner will get an SMS, and through the SMS he can pay the amount in the real time, because owners are always ready to pay the fine and go away. Because if they go in the seizure mode, it's a very big issue. They need to pay to the tout for the 100 rupees fine will become 1000 rupees for them to get their vehicles back. And these data will now be utilized for accident prediction, and we are coming down with a system wherein the way we will go for the way we use Google Maps to understand and which road will be more faster will come down. We will use these data to tell them that which road will be much safer. So these are primarily few innovations which we're talking about. Now I'd like to show you few slides about the innovation, because the moment we innovate, and if it is not accepted, it's of no use. So we need to understand why the innovations fail, and what all parameters we should look upon to make these innovations better, basically better accepted by the people.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sharing my screen.
Yeah, we
As
are
you
able
can
to see this.
see,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
are the few parameters for this acceptance of any innovation. So they are basically behavioral characteristics, and this has been captured from the worldwide literature, where all innovations, particularly in the this innovation in the governance domain, So when we have categorized everything and we have tried to factor analyze and try to find out the three main parameters, as we can see. So the three main parameters are functional catalyst, power catalyst, and innophobia. So these three things are there, where basically if we focus on the main three parameters, basically functional catalyst relates to the functionalities of those particular innovation. Power catalyst is basically with respect to the perceived image and resource and the cost, and innophobia, which you found out, is the biggest bottleneck of any innovation. So with perceived risk, everyone is basically not willing to go and try and see whether these things, whether it will be will data, for example, innophobia, filling up online form, so data theft, data misuse, all these things comes into the picture. Primarily with respect to the payment gateway, still many people don't use the online payment gateway with the fear that their money will be stolen. So these things are there. Now coming down to the power catalyst, the cost factor, in all these three, there are the surrogate variables are cost in power catalyst, where the cost is basically, even if you see that when we started with the payment gateway and the payment gateway charges were around 15 rupees or so. So I have seen people willing to go stand in a queue to pay the electricity bill just to save that 15 rupees, which has now come down to 5 rupees or 10 rupees also. But there are people who will walk 500 meters, stand in a queue and pay those bills to save the 10 rupees and 15 rupees. So cost is also a big barrier. These are the three main components. So as we can see, relative advantage is definitely something which affects the innovation. Basically, we can any relative advantage factor will enhance the innovation diffusion, but users cost and perceived risk, these two things are which basically distract the people from using accepting any diffusion in innovation basically. So as we can find out, so this is the model. From this model, the main features are basically the relative advantage, perceived risk, and cost. And these three are the major parameters which we can, if we can control all the innovations, will have a better chance of getting accepted by the people. So the key findings are that perceived image also influences perceived affordability. The moment basically few people try to use it just to showcase. So these are the key findings, and cost is always a big barrier. Whatever might be any additional cost will defer it. And risk is always a big issue there. So what we can found, the key enablers of diffusion is the compatibility will have an exponential positive impact. So if something is similar to the earlier thing, so that will be enhancing the thing. Data security and cost, basically data security, misuse of data, theft of online money, and cost of availing those things are the biggest concerns. Steps to reduce cost and improve data security will enhance that diffusion. Saving of time and effectiveness under relative advantage is definitely going to enhance. This is the model which I have proposed, where the functional catalyst, power catalyst, and risk are there. If you can enhance the functional catalyst and enhance the power catalyst and reduce the risk, the chances of any innovation diffusion will be much higher. These are the strategic frameworks which we have found. Now, this all from my side. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Roy. I think very interesting. You've actually shown, I think, almost a regression-based analysis of the three important components, which is functional catalyst, power catalyst, and infophobia. I'll come back to the questions once I finish with all the
structure equation modeling was also done post-regression.
Yeah.
So we've done the SEM for this. Yeah, thank you.
Right, excellent. So I'll come back to you after I finish with all the participants in the first round. I'm now move on to Ms. Munish Chandan from the government of Haryana. Are you there, Mr. Chandan?
Yes, sir, I am here. Thank you very much.
So what are your views on the innovations in governance and your experience in that regard, and the road forward in this? Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for giving opportunity. Thank you, Raman Fahim, for organizing such a wonderful national digital conclave, and bringing us all together on single platform. So I answer your point, sir. COVID pandemic gave ample amount of opportunities to everybody to innovate and see how the innovations really work in good governance and making things better for the people. So when everything was not working, it was the only IT which was giving options to different citizens and giving and keeping people informed on what is happening and how the government can reach out to the citizens. So for me, that good governance and better governance, or initially less governance and then moving on to a better, fully governed society, that actually we saw the implementation when the COVID pandemic things happened. So multiple initiatives were taken by the government of Haryana, and they were not thought of. We were not prepared for those things. They were all because of the situation. Those initiatives came into being, and I am proud to say that that the adaptability of those initiatives is still going on, and people have started liking and getting adapt to those things. One was the Atmanirbhar portal, which was earlier launched as the bank slot and postal bank services, where the citizen can book a slot to go to a bank and get the services, or he can even block a slot and receive payment at home through an online this payment postal bank payment system. So the nearest postman will come to the doorstep, and he will deliver the AEPS based transaction and up to cash up to 10,000 at home. So I'm glad that this system is still going on, and people who were unable to go to the branches due to some or the other reasons, they are still using this system, and it arised out of innovation, but still that function is prevailing. So the next system which we developed on the banking side was the Atmanirbhar, and when the financial inclusion started, where the Atmanirbhar India the package was announced, and we introduced a system where the citizens were facilitated for the interest subvention. So they were applying, and we were ensuring that their applications are addressed by the banks and a proper tracking is done. So for small loans, for DRI loans of say up to 10,000 or up to 15,000, the banks generally don't they are not encouraged to give those loans. So we wanted to keep a track of all those applications, and if they are not handling those applications, what is the reason? So our CSC centers played a role in that. The applicant could go to a CSC center and apply with his credentials. A Aadhaar based KYC was there, and we knew that this application is genuine, and the bank has to honor that. So this way we were keeping a track on the banks as well, where every bank branch is given some IDs, and we are getting the reports, and we can chase those banks and branches for disbursement of loans on to the citizens. So that was one innovative idea in the banking side, where financial inclusion was dropped in. The second part was during the pandemic, when the fear was very high and people were very scared to come out of their houses. We thought of having a portal where we get some volunteers. So the Honorable Chief Minister Haryana, he appealed for the volunteers in different domains, like doctors, like the people who can deliver some stuff, people who can provide their transport for delivery of food material. So many types of volunteers, nurses, paramedics. So all those volunteers were onboarded, and more than 1 lakh volunteers were onboarded, and they were used by the district administration for their facilitation during the COVID pandemic time. So that was one kind of innovation where we initially thought that who would volunteer, but over 1 lakh people, they volunteered in the operations. And then we onboarded multiple shops who got themselves enrolled, and they volunteered for delivering foodstuffs, food to different places using the services of the volunteers. So all that synchronization was done. And we also asked for plasma donors, which is the function that portal is still going on, and people who get recovered, they are opting in for plasma donation, and the district administration is utilizing their services as and when the need is there. So these ways we developed few innovative systems. Presently, the Haryana government IT department has taken the task of getting the e-Khareed done on a self-developed platform, and I am in charge of that portal and all the e-cream. Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are, Mr. Chandan.
So currently, we have developed a full self-made in the in-house system in Haryana to do the khareed of the kharif crop, all the 4 or 5 crops which are there, that we ensure that the crops are purchased and the payments are made to the farmer in a time-bound way, in an online way, DBT, through DBT. So these days, sir, we are doing our bit to innovate and redefine governance. And the overall objective is to give good governance to the citizens. And Haryana is doing pretty well. I feel as other states are doing very well, Haryana is also in the lead. So I would like to end here.
Thank you, Mr. Chandan. I think you've given some very interesting examples of innovation in this COVID pandemic times, and how quickly you've been able to drive those innovations in terms of enabling payments for the citizens through the postal department, through this AEBS system, and also the interest subvention which you mentioned for the citizens under the Atmanirbhar scheme. And I think the volunteer program of Haryana is famous all over the country in terms of how you've been able to get a very large number of those volunteers in a very short period of time to handle the COVID pandemic. So thank you very much. And I'll come back to you maybe with some supplementary questions. We are also joined by Ms. Shalini Rajneesh, who's the Additional Chief Secretary of Planning, Program Implementation and Statistics in Government of Telangana. So welcome, ma'am. We are very happy to see you. In fact, the topic which we are discussing is innovations in new governance, and also new governance for the new world order. And we some very interesting examples of our fellow panelists who have talked about their experiences in driving innovations in their own states, in their departments. You are in a very, I would say, progressive state, which is known for a lot of innovations in governance, and especially the use of technology in governance. So what are your thoughts and some of your experiences in driving innovations in governance?
Sure. I have sent my PPT that can be shared. It will be easy for people to relate to it. So, as rightly pointed out, Bangalore, the capital of Karnataka, known as Silicon Valley of India, has really, won accolades. It is ranked number 2 in India Innovation Index. Digital transformation and engagement, government has played a very, very proactive role in terms of various empowering provisions, as well as IT-enabled software platforms which have been provided. I'd like to share a couple of those platforms which are very well known, and some of them have been awarded on the Prime Minister's Award. Bhumi, everybody knows about the land records. Sakala is for the public services in a delivery of public services in time-bound manner. Bangalore one is a PPP model where services are given online through kind of cyber cafes, or payment of bills, etc., are de-linked from the usual government offices. Varun Mitra is another project where the farmers are given early warning about severe climatic conditions. And Apt Mitra is very relevant in the recent times of COVID pandemic, where people are given online teleconsultation on COVID-19. So just these are a few examples, but the idea behind this whole conference also is to learn from each other as to what are the new advances that have been made. I would like to share the wonderful work done by, can you please move on the PPT, somebody who's there, please link it to my talk. The Startup Karnataka, that has been a very, very encouraging and very successful model started by the ITBT department. We've got 11,657 startups in place. And the beauty of this project is that we have got 47 innovation hubs which are actually located in the colleges and universities. So that's where you catch them young, the young student crowd. Then you have the centers of excellence, 6 of them, and 5 of them are technology business incubators. So that's where, you know, the technology, the innovations are taken down to the commercialization levels. When we talk of some important challenges that we have today before these startups, there are 6 which have been identified by the government: water and sewage management, plant disease and pest infection diagnostics, effective delivery of primary health services, tackling undernutrition, traffic congestion in Bangalore, and water conservation. These are actually related to, please keep moving the PPT slides. I don't have the control over the slides. Move on, move on. So we talk of, you know, these digital strategies where the innovative spirit has to be encouraged. Secondly, digital literacy has to be improved. Infrastructure has to be enabling and agile, and the user's experience has to be enhanced. So the factors which would reshape digital transformation, be it in Karnataka or elsewhere, are the innovators, the enablers, the accelerators, and the movers. So we in the government are actually the enablers. And I'd like to share one very important platform which has been taken up by our e-governance department, that is called Karnataka Open Data Initiative, wherein all the public data, without the privacy details, just the numbers of all departments is being put on a public domain, so that researchers, entrepreneurs, startups, they can all have access to that data and create more and more innovative startups or ventures and so on. So this is as an enabler. If government takes a proactive role, I'm sure more and more of innovation, digital innovation, as well as industrial and growth and prosperity is bound to occur. We have also an artificial intelligence research translation park. This is one of its kind, and I am sure many other states could probably take a look at it. Another very important thing is about agnostic sandboxing bill. This is the first attempt where we create a regulatory sandbox which allows startups from the field to apply for testing of their innovations in the real field. And this helps many innovators to translate their dreams into reality. Finally, I would relate all this to the Sustainable Development Goal number 9, which stands for Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure. We are number 1, as I said, in Innovation, India Innovation Index, and all these strategies that I've spoken about, so not just from the Department of E-Governance or ITBT, but from all departments concerned, leads to enabling a better SDG environment for the Karnataka state. We develop inclusive infrastructure. We promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization. We increase access to financial services and markets. We upgrade all industries and infrastructure for sustainability, and we enhance research and upgrade industrial technology. Finally, I would talk of the way forward. Please come to the last slide, please. What is the way forward for all of us? I find particularly for SDG 9, if we look at energy efficient public transport, I talked of one of the challenges that was the traffic of Bangalore. So on one side, we have huge IT industry growth, but another side, we have congestion on traffic. So that is one way we are still looking at solutions. Then we are trying to provide grants and enhancing fiscal incentives for R&D related activities. Also, we are trying to promote social and community R&D by setting up local skill development centers using CSR, and one of its kind I would like to mention is SAP, a multinational company, which has come up for an online digital platform for giving career counseling to our youth as well as women. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity, and I hope to learn from the insights of other states and other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. In fact, it was a very comprehensive overview of the entire innovation ecosystem at play in the state of Karnataka. And I really like the initiative in regard to Karnataka Open Data initiative. I think that actually spurs a lot of private innovation based on the data which actually resides in our system, and sometimes can be very rich source of data on which, in fact, I'll give you one example of that. In my previous assignment, in fact, a couple of very young entrepreneurs, they came to me who were actually working in an MNC, and they were saying that if the road transport buses data can be put in an open platform, they would like to use that data in terms of telling to the public at what time a particular bus is arriving. And it's a very simple example of that. And I'm really congratulate you and the state for this entire set of these initiatives.
I will just say that during pandemic, when everybody, especially the intellectuals, all graduates and postgraduates were indoors during lockdown, I got 400 odd interns to do detailed analysis on the data that I provided them on the open platform. So, and it's been all free of cost. And let me tell you, the quality of the interns' reports is amazing. And this is how we made best of the worst situation using digital technology and transformation.
Excellent, ma'am. Congratulations to you and the state for these very, very interesting initiatives. I'll come back to you, ma'am. And next we move on to Mr. Sanjay Garg, who's joining us from Gujarat. So, in fact, we had some poor audio connectivity initially. So, your thoughts on this? Sorry, again, we are not able to hear you. No. Okay. I think we're not able to get him due to some audio issues. Yeah, thank you very much, and maybe we'll again have you next time. So I move back to Mr. Jayesh Ranjan. Sir, are you there?
Yes, Naveen, go ahead.
Yeah. So, in fact, something which I wanted to ask you was this initiative of RICH, which is especially designed for innovations. So, if you can explain to us about the entire concept and how it is helpful in driving research and innovation in the state of Telangana.
Yes. So, RICH is a very unique institution. The term RICH stands for Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad. So, in Hyderabad and also in other cities like, let us say, Bangalore, Delhi, Chennai, etc., we are very fortunate that there are multiple research institutions of the highest caliber. We have in Hyderabad, for example, some of the best life sciences institutions. We have some of the premier agriculture institutions, pure sciences institutions. We have the entire plethora of defense R&D institutions. But typically, we would notice three things about these institutions. One was that they would operate in silos. So what is one institution doing would not be known to the other, and they would be completely in their own silos. In fact, I was told anecdotally that one faculty member from one institution and one faculty member of another institution, they were participating at a seminar, and there coincidentally they realized for the first time ever that they are doing practically similar work, and there are huge synergies in their work. And back in Hyderabad, their offices are just 100 meters away. I mean, the institution, Hyderabad, you must be aware about this Uppal area, large number of such institutions are located. So my office is a stone's throw of yours, and I really don't know what you do, and they don't know what I do. So this is one. The second which we found out was that most of the research which was happening was very esoteric and not really addressing the needs of the government or the people or the industry. I'm researching something with a very long-term interest, which is fine. I mean, I'm not saying that anything wrong when doing that research, but the priority that one needs to give to actually solving live problems, that was missing. And the third thing was that the outcome of a research, the end goal of a research typically was not to commercialize and bring the research findings to the open market, but it was at the most to write a brilliant academic paper which gets published in a peer-reviewed journal and so on and so forth. So Rich has changed all that. Rich has created a platform. First of all, we have listed almost 40 plus institutions. What are their faculties interested in? What are they working on? So, and the Rich team has been able to now synergize that, okay, you are doing something which someone else is also working on. So why don't you constitute a joint working group and so on and so forth. We have brought industry's interests into the mix. So now lots of research is happening which has industry partnership, etc. Typically these brilliant institutions, their doors will be very difficult to open for a startup. If a startup wants to reach out and get some issue resolved, he will find it very, very difficult. So Rich has changed all that. Now there is lots of very active startup collaboration. So just by creating an institution and putting some people in charge of that institution who understand academia, who understand industry, who are clued in about the startup requirements, etc., that fundamentally alters the dynamics in that ecosystem. And in Hyderabad, we are really reaching the rewards of having an institution like Rich, which has galvanized some 40 odd research institutions into doing things which are more meaningful, more relevant, and doing it in a very inclusive way, in a participatory way.
Thank you, sir. I think that's a very ideal example of how one can create an entity which can really kind of handhold the various entities which are involved in the research and innovation. And as you mentioned, the 3 points, which is research is happening in silos, and many times the priorities are not very clear, and also the outcomes of the research do not reach the intended or the possible beneficiaries. So I think that's a very, very, I would say, interesting example of how an institution can change it, and something which I think all the states should emulate. In fact, in the new education policy, there's a concept of National Research Foundation, which is going to be created at the national level, which is going to be the coordinating entity and maybe also a funding entity for research in our academic institutions. And I think a similar kind of entity is also required for innovation. I'm told that there is already this National Innovation Foundation which is doing some work, but I think both research and innovation need to be combined together, as has been successfully done in the state of Telangana. So really, congratulations, sir, for getting this body in. I move to Mr. Kamal Kashyap. Mr. Kashyap, you talked about these 3 things, which is data, the platform, and last mile connectivity, and also leveraging the existing assets. Do you have any practical examples of any project which has leveraged these 3 things which you talked about in your initial talk?
Yes, sir. Sure. So, but before that, I just wanted to, kind of acknowledge the great work that Mr. Ranjan and team is doing in Telangana. And I had a privilege of first-hand experiencing T-Hub and T-Works, at least, going through that and seeing how it is kind of triggering innovation, not just in the government, but also fostering innovation in terms of helping startups and young entrepreneurs. And such institutions which are coming up with the help of both T-Work and T-Hub. So amazingly great platform and catalyst for that. And I will just take one more example from there itself of an existing thing, which is a concept that we did with the government of Telangana around Digital Village, where we took some pieces of existing infrastructure and actually created that. And essentially a whole lot of our Wi-Fi technology and a concept called eHealth Center, where we we take a shipping container, which we see every day on the trucks and stuff like that, retrofit it with some devices and structure to make it like a primary healthcare center. It's all we need from the government or anybody is the connectivity and power, and you have a full-fledged working connected primary healthcare center, and as well as telemedicine rolled into one. So usually the government either provides the hospital backing, or they provide um, an engagement with one of the leading hospitals, specialty or otherwise, and a lot of leading hospital chains in the country are supporting there, is to actually, and then suddenly you have this simple thing translated into something which can provide healthcare intervention at rural or semi-urban locations. And we did that with the government of Telangana for a few. We have expanded it to a level where almost more than 1 million patients have traveled through that, have benefited from it. It's in remote parts of Uttaranchal, where in some places it had to be kind of dropped via helicopter, but it's kind of there. And what we did is, during the course of this pandemic, we actually transformed such e-health centers which were across the country into a COVID response center, where the additional structure required to enable it to handle a stream of COVID suspects or people who wanted testing and stuff to follow through. And there also, in terms of partitioning it, providing sanitization and so on and so forth. So quickly you could translate that into a setup which could handle not just what it was handling earlier, but also the current situation, the problem that was required. And hopefully once the world is out of this this whole issue around COVID, I hope it is soon, then they can kind of go back and serve the needs of the primary healthcare center. The other one, which I had briefly alluded to, is the whole smart city ICCC. If you see, the whole ICCCs were designed actually to be the nerve center of the city, and what more a situation to actually test that nerve center in such a scenario. So, and I can, without naming the cities, but some of the cities that we're working with as a system integrator and technology provider, there we were able to, and each city has a different view and a different, specific problem to handle. Somewhere the cases were going high, some had a lot of influx of tourists and other such migrant population that they wanted to handle. So creating solutions which leverage the data coming in from various sources, including people who are applying to travel into the state or into the city, the data from the hospitals, data from various sources, as well as hooking on to the video data in case you wanted to actually set up a containment zone. So use that data for analytics, use the data for also planning and intervention. So suddenly an existing ICCC, which was otherwise monitoring, the basic public utilities, was now the nerve center of where you had people from the health department, you had people from the civic works, also the state government, maybe police as required, to actually monitor that. And in some of these places, this is the current scenario, but in many of the places, they were also used during the time of elections by the election commission as the monitoring center for the state, because it had the entire infrastructure, and it also had the ability to develop SOPs, as well as pass in data, pass in instructions, and quickly alert and intervene as required. So that's an example of how you can kind of actually leverage what is existing and quickly turn it around into an innovative solution to handle the current situation.
Yeah, so really interesting, Mr. Kashyap, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity in government to really leverage some of these existing digital assets and technologies, and I'm happy that you talked about some of them. And as I also was talking about, I mean, this huge amount of assets lying in one department, many times redundant, or many times they're not optimally used, which can be really utilized for another department, or another service, or maybe a different service in the same department. The last question I would go back to Mrs. Shalini Rajneesh. Ma'am, if you're there. Okay, so maybe to right. So maybe I'll end with you, Dr. Roy. You talked about some of the things. For example, the innovations in traffic and transportation. How easy or how difficult was it to drive those innovations, especially in a department which is basically many times is working in silos compared to the rest of the government. I mean, mostly if you see the police department is an entity which has a very little interaction with most of the other departments. So how easy or difficult it was to drive innovation there?
It was really difficult. It was really indeed difficult. But we had a support from the highest authority. In fact, Home Secretary Sir and ADG Traffic uh, used to interfere and go and visit on the places, because it was killing their entire cycle. Earlier they used to just stand on the roads for 2-3 hours, complete their so-called quota, and then they used to vanish from the places. Now, since there's a timestamp, location, and including the photographs of the violations, so they used to stay throughout the day. So they initially, basically, I'm from government, we used to go there, support there. So they initially thought that we are from some private organization. They used to avoid us. They used to say, you people are just selling anything to the highest level, and we are facing the trouble. We started with a basically 2G device and with one SIM. Then now we have ended up with a 4G device, 4G plus 4G dual SIM, and with a high-end 2-core processor. It is working perfectly. It took a lot of time, but the benefit behind it was so good. In fact, it was placed before our HCM also, that using this data, we can try and predict the accidents. We can also try and predict the road conditions. So these data will be now used for artificial intelligence. Since
So
we're talking
thank you.
about
I think yeah. I mean,
difficult thing, I'll just add one more
this-
addition. We started e-prescription long back in all government hospitals. So our main aim was to digitize the data and all. But doctors said, no, we'll not use this e-prescription because we can't type. Then we told them, okay, we're giving you the drop downs. You give us the keywords, we'll give a drop down, so time will be reduced. That also they didn't accept it. Then we have now started with a voice-based e-prescription. They will speak and the prescription will generate automatically. Now they're asking for a total customization with respect to their own things. Eye doctor is asking for eye photographs, which they'll point out there and all these things. So it's a series of process. It's a iterations, but definitely that is the acceptance is the key goal. But we'll try and get the things done. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Roy. I think you explained about when many times the initiatives or the innovations are not internally driven, but then driven from outside, and how difficult sometimes it can be. You mentioned two of these examples, so very interesting ones. With this, I think we have come to the end of our panel discussion. In fact, I must say that it has been a very interesting session, especially for me personally. To talk to all our co-panelists who have really done some remarkable work in their fields. And it really gave a very, very good sense of what innovation in governance is all about. And I'm somehow personally very optimistic that there's a huge, huge scope for innovation in governance. In fact, personally, any department or any sector which I've handled, and I've seen that there is immense possibility or potential for driving innovation in almost everything which we do in a particular department, and the sky's the limit. So I really look forward to increased innovation in governance, especially in India. Both the central government and the state governments, there's an immense potential. And today's panel discussion, we've got some very interesting examples from various sectors and various states about how innovation can drive transformation in the field of governance. So I take this opportunity to thank all my co-panelists for a very interesting and enriching discussions, and I wish you all the best in your future initiatives. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mittal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.